Hey, happy Sunday. So we're in Esther 6. We're going to take a look at verses 12 through 14. And Mordecai came again to the king's gate, but Haman hastened to his house mourning and having his head covered. And Haman told Zeresh his wife and all of his friends everything that had befallen him. Then said his wise men and Zeresh his wife unto him, If Mordecai be the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, then thou shalt not prevail against him, but shalt surely fall before him. And while they were yet talking with him, came the king's chamberlains, and hasted to bring Haman unto the banquet that Esther had prepared. So, a few things there. Let's start with the phrases that are used, right? So, Haman hasted to his house to mourn. So, what's just happened is because he thought he was going to elevate himself with the king, he actually ended up elevating Mordecai and parading him around town in the king's robe, on the king's horse, and Haman had to say that the king delighteth in Mordecai. And so all of a sudden, the timing changes, right? God can be slow to move, and then when he moves, sometimes it's like, oh, you're moving so fast, Lord. Your dance has picked up. So Haman hasted to his house, and at the end of the verses we read today, he's then hasted out of his house to Esther's second banquet that she's throwing for him. But it's what happens in the middle there that I really want to chat about today. He returns back to his house, and it says Zeresh and his friends, and then later they're referred to as his wise men. So wise men can really be related to advisors or to counselors, and particularly the words used in this book, verse are going to be like more about like they're wise after the fact, right? Like the night before when Haman was elevated high, he was feeling good. They were all about like, oh, you should kill Mordecai. Oh, you're so great and so awesome. Now all of a sudden, as the tide starts to turn, they're changing their tune, right? And I think that we all, while we cannot maybe relate to Haman's mindset in this, we can relate to these type of folks. It's why having the right people around you, the right circle really matters, because all of a sudden they're like, you're not going to do so well because it's the seed of the Jews. You're going to start to fall. Now, a lot of Haman's beef, right, with Mordecai is about being Jewish. It's really an ethnic clash there. So that's part of the reason they would say that. But I also think about the texts that these folks would have had from Jewish authors, Jewish writers. There was once a boy taken to Babylon with 3 of his friends, right? Daniel. And Daniel ended up elevating up high enough that he was the head of the Magi at one point. So his writings and his works would have been something that many people would have known. In fact, so many of the Magi would have read his works that later they're going to follow a star and find a young boy that's going to be real important to our story too. But for today, before we get to that story, right, the reason that I really think about why does it matter? Why does Zeresh and the friends say, gosh, when you come up against the seed of the Jews, you have an issue? Well, it's because of the main character in our story, right? Because of God. Because God moves with us in a way that is so different. And to illustrate that example, let's go to what they might have read, right? The book of Daniel. So I'm in Daniel 3, and what's happened here in Daniel 3 is King Nebuchadnezzar, as the king of Babylon, he has erected a statue of himself, right? And it's big, right? And every time the music plays, everyone is to bow down and worship this statue. It happens to be that the 3 guys that are Daniel's friends, they don't bow down to worship the statue, and that doesn't go over really well. Now, their names were taken from them, and they were given names that refer to gods of Babylon. I don't like those names, I'm going to be honest. So when I refer to them, I'm going to call them Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Say their names because they matter to me. But the fact that they wouldn't bow down to the statue, that's one thing. But I want to go to what they say about it when the king questions about it, because the result is they're going to be thrown into a fiery furnace that's been heated 7 times to die. And this is what they say. Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thy hand, O king. Now that I think we can relate to. So many times we say to ourselves, well, God's going to turn this around. He's going to give us something good, right? But what is really incredible about these guys' faith, what really makes a difference here, what makes a difference when they say the seed of the Jews, is what they say next. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. It's one thing when, God's going to turn it around and be good. It's another when you say, well, I'm going to worship God anyway. I love my God. And if he doesn't save me from the fire, in fact, so often he does not, then I'm not going to worry about it. I'm still going to worship my God. I'm not going to bow down to your God. That's an incredible faith. That's the kind of faith that when read about years later, Zeresh and friends and Haman, that they all might be like, ugh. You're coming up not against just this people, you're coming up the God of these people. And that God is incredible. That God is the one that we've read about in stories. So what ends up happening? So the fire is kindled, right? It's so hot it burns all of the guards that are throwing the guys in the fire, and then they're in the fire. And this is what happens and this is Daniel, I have to remember that. Daniel, this is Daniel 3, and it's verse 24. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonied, and rose up in haste, and spake, and said unto his counselors, Did not we cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. So our message for us, right, is 1, you got to have the right people around you. Just like Zeresh and these wise men around Haman, they were good to elevate him when he was high, and when he was low, they got real different. It's also important to have friends like Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah say their names, because their faith can bring us to God, right? And God doesn't save us from the fire, but he's going to walk with us in the fire. And what ultimately happens is the king Nebuchadnezzar is going to call to these men, and they're going to come out, and guess what? Nebuchadnezzar is going to give glory to God. They're going to turn someone from his ways back to the glory of who our God is. So it's a very different ending here than we're going to see as we head into Esther's second banquet. But Haman and Zeresh and their friends, their tail is all hung up on the wrong thing. So it's always about the fall. So we're going to see what happens when you don't give glory to God, when you don't stand by God, whether he saves you from the fire or he puts you in it, and what happens when you stay in that fire and allow God to walk with you. So we'll talk again. Happy Sunday, chatting at Cheesman, chatting at Cheesman. Happy Sunday. God's with you.